I will today talk about how to overcome the obstacles of exploratory testing at scale. To start this, I would actually like to define how I see exploratory testing so we do speak a common language versus confirmatory testing. So first of all, what isn't is mechanical testing. Mechanical testing is what I see as confirmatory testing. Pre-designed processes, predefined data. Versus here, it is intelligent testing. People learn, and from experience, they can identify new test objectives or new test ideas. Furthermore, by that, they can analyze potential risk, not just known risk, where we would have if we have like standard manual testing or automated testing. This, in the end, will lead to low information value for manual or automated testing, but high risk coverage, because we do know, monitor known risk. Versus high information value here, we learn new things all the time while doing exploratory testing. We explore the field of our software versus where we don't here. The problem is, it is hard to scale. It is really hard to scale because it relies solely on humans, where here we have an easy to scale solution that can automate on multiple machines and so on and so forth. So that's where I see the big difference, where we have a change detector versus a problem detector. Here we are checking for known risks if they're still not in a faulty state. Here we explore the application and see if there is something coming up that might be unknown or might be new to anyone. Going forward, I quickly want to talk about the problem of scaling itself. On the problem we had in our company. So we were scaling agile teams. From 2016 to 2019, we scaled from around 5 to around 30 agile teams. That comes with challenges, as you might expect. So what did we expect? So in the beginning, we started scaling those teams, and we expected a small decline in results. The outcome looked more like this. Very, very fast, it would decline to a point where there is unhappiness. And at this point, we had to do one thing: understand why scaling didn't work as it was intended in the first place. We identified 3 major problems with scaling. Which was first, communication between teams. The more people or the more teams we had, the more teams had to communicate to each other, and it was problematic. We had stand-ups for common stand-up where one representative of any team would talk, so we can monitor problems that would come over the whole company. 19 people in a room, that doesn't work. Then this leads to team dependencies. This team is working on something, we rely on what they have to finish. They are working on something, they may break what we are doing in the meanwhile. So we also have technical dependencies. These were the 3 major problems we tried to address. How did we address it? So very quickly, I just quickly go through. We introduced tribes, centralized agile coaches, a technical split in our product, community of practices where people tried to understand and learn what others did, and team values. People defined for themselves what are the values of their teams. Very quickly here, I will come to in a second why this is important. Because we have the same when we talk about exploratory testing and scaling. Why is it so hard to scale exploratory testing in the first place? There is many, many things you have to consider. And yet again, we sat down on a table and tried to understand, hey, what are the problems with scaling exploratory testing? We came to these conclusions. First of all, normally, when we worked with clients, there was no common knowledge base of what exploratory testing actually is. So it is really hard. I think if I would talk to 5, 6 people here, I would get 5 to 6 definitions of what exploratory testing is. So I think this is the very first thing to address, of giving people an understanding of what we understand as exploratory testing, to have one common source of truth and not multiple. The next thing is an underlying common understanding of testing itself. What is testing? Is it just executing what is already there? Is it the learning of new things in the application? Is it exploring how bugs might get produced or get created? That's hard, right? These are problems that need to be fundamentally solved in the beginning, that you have one understanding of testing or exploratory testing, that in the end you can implement it over a large scale, over a large corporation. So very specifically to exploratory testing, it is very, very hard to measure because you can branch out into different areas. You can branch out in exploring new areas of the product that you haven't tested before. So it's really hard if you improved while testing. The next thing, it is hard to aggregate. So because if you then couldn't measure it in the first place, you didn't know where did we improve. You could also not aggregate the results because one time you maybe branched out into one direction, one time in another direction. Are those two correlated? We don't know if we do not have a framework in place that helps us actually delivering these aggregabilities or reporting capabilities to actually address these problems. And last, what results out of that is consistency. So if all of these things are not solved in the first place, it is really, 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 really hard to test consistent, which is basically then the end that you can, in the end, have aggregatable and measurable results only if you're testing consistently. So how did we solve it? And the talk said case study. So this is what we did with a few of our clients back last and the year before. So first of all, we defined the approach. The approach was exploratory testing. And just as before, we had techniques. We wanted to apply techniques of how we can actually solve the problem of all the things that we just heard. So the first thing is, and I will now talk about many, many concepts of exploratory testing that were actually like written about or like in books or presentations by other authors. They will be attributed here. If afterwards you're interested, I would encourage you reading up on those specifically. I will just briefly touch them. The first thing is we said we want to do session-based testing. What is that? Session-based testing is what we say is imagination in a straitjacket. You want to branch out, but what we want to do is limit the scope of what we want to do within one exploratory session. A time-boxed session where we have like 2 hours of time and a very concrete mission of what we want to do. Furthermore, to actually now we have this straitjacket. Now we want to limit it to a specific scope. People need to understand why they are doing something. So we said we want to base it on requirements. It's nice to just go out there, do some exploratory testing and just go for the application and hope you find something. But in the end, if you base it on a requirement, something someone has already defined as something we need for this software, the requirement of performance in the web application and so on and so forth, then we have like a scope to actually shoot for. And the third thing is Tor Based Testing. So what is Tor Based Testing? So there's a book by James Whitaker that talks about exploratory testing, and he introduced the concept of Tor Based Testing, where you would like assign different sessions, different tours. For example, I will just give you 2 examples here, the supermodel tour. For example, you say, while we test this, we want to do the supermodel tour, which means we just look at everything very superficially. We don't go too deep. Just on the very surface, just look, does it look as it should be? For example, for a performance test, just go into the application, does it feel performant? Does it feel right? You could do the same performance test with the FedEx tour. The FedEx tour talks about looking at every packet, like in the application, where does it go? Like from which like endpoint is it sent and where is it sent to? And where do we actually lose performance? And that's like twice the same test, but from a very, very different perspective. And this gives us the chance, actually, to, in the end, look at the way of how different stakeholders would look at that problem. Because like a programmer might be interested in which packets are sent around and where do they go and why are they slow, where a UX designer might be interested in, does it feel performant? It might not. Furthermore, there is a book by Edward de Bono. It's called The 6 Thinking Hats. So, and like what gives us like into the mix is that we say we put a hat on each of these sessions. Normally a tester only wears the black hat, the critical hat. We always want to find that bug. We want to look at that application and only find that bug. That's all we want to do. But maybe we will also want to look at it from a positive perspective. Maybe we have a chance to find different bugs if we are very positive in what we're doing and we don't want to find the bug explicitly, but we do it as a user who is also very positive while using our application. Maybe we look at the application differently and find bugs that we would have otherwise not. And last but not least, which is I think the most important thing, is scenario-based testing, which means in the end you want to document and specify what you did so you can recreate it. In the end, to have this result aggregatable, you need to be able to reproduce the results and therefore measure it by documenting it, taking screenshots, taking notes, and having this in a format that is agreed upon before so that everyone knows what to do while we have that session. So this is our like pod of different things we might want to use in a session. Obviously, you can't do all of it all the time at one point. Sometimes it makes sense to leave one out or to maybe also do all of it. But in the end, what it comes to is like what Lord Kelvin said, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. And this framework gives us measurability. And that's what like we said is very, very important for exploratory testing to scale it. And I would really like to end the presentation here, but unfortunately, something like this is making it really hard. So if you have a very, very good plan about how you like build up muscles, you go to the fitness center, 16 hours straight you train. You will not look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. You will have to go there for 1 hour for 6 months. And that's the thing. That's the very important thing here as well. Long-term consistency beats short-term intensity. Very important, because if we look at what we did here. In the beginning, it looked like this. Like on the very top is like very good results with our exploratory tests. Wasn't that good. And to all, like if you want to like scale exploratory testing in your organization, to all the test managers, it's hard. Like you need to have trust in your people that it will get better. But I promise you, after a while, after people understand the concepts, after they improve, it does get better by itself. But you need to put the trust in the beginning. So now what is like this little formula that we put together to actually scale exploratory testing? It starts with having the right mechanics in place. Having those techniques that we defined in the beginning, having everyone understand what is exploratory testing for us, having everyone like on the board of how we want to do things. The next thing is consistency. Apply these things in a consistent day-by-day behavior. Don't just do like one exploratory session after 6 months of implementation. No, the good thing here is you don't need a finished application. Do it every week, every 2 weeks, whatever works for you, but be consistent and apply it over and over again and improve and learn on what you did. That's like a key point of exploratory testing. There is not one like way of doing it and that's the right way. No, you want to learn and improve over the course of time on like what you defined at the beginning. The next thing is trust, as I said. Like there is points in the beginning, like very heavily. It doesn't scale easily. There is points where you need to have trust, even in this now fast world that we are in. You need to have trust that over the potential of time, you can achieve the things that you want to achieve with exploratory testing. The last thing is intensity. It will come by itself. People will get more knowledgeable, they will get more excited about what they're doing in exploratory testing. They will understand it at one point. There's a lot of things you need to learn before. In the beginning, people might not like it. They might not understand why we are doing it. But as soon as they understand it, they will see the value. So what is this values now? What are those awesome results? So we defined 5 different things we want to measure on, if we're successful with it or not. And by the way, we also like did this within our own engineering departments. So implementing it like that way, and we looked at, does it work? Does it work for us? Therefore, does it work for a client? 5 things that we looked at. Production defects, so how many defects do we actually have in production? Production severity, like how many critical defects versus non-critical defects do we have in production? Defect variety, so how many defects per area, performance, usability, functionality do we have in production? Mean time to feedback, does it actually improve like our way of finding a bug or finding something that is like unnatural to getting it to the developer to get it fixed? Like is the feedback coming to the developer faster or slower by doing exploratory testing? That's what we want to know. And the last thing is the formal testing leak. How many of those bugs that we found by exploratory testing could have been found by our regression? Like if we had a perfect regression, would they be found by the things we predefined before? That's the numbers we had with one of our clients. So I want to emphasize on the last 2, because I think they are very important, which is the mean time to feedback. What we did is we created like sessions, test sessions, every Friday for 2 hours. So meaning we start half an hour of a briefing, what are we doing and why are we doing it, what will the session be, what is the hats we are wearing, what type of tour are we doing. 1 hour of testing, 30 minutes of documenting and debriefing. In the end, there was a test result, like developers had access to and they could look at it instantly. Before they found a bug, it has to be reported, reviewed, and over like very, very weird and long ways come to the developer. That's unfortunate. That sucks. You have to wait forever. Next thing is the formal testing leak. And I think that's the most like shocking thing when I normally talk about the topic. 88% of the bugs that were found would not have been found by regression. Like I normally get the question, why do we even formally test them? And I think it's very important to like step back here. As we said, we see formal testing, or I see formal testing as a change detector. It is not normal that your regression breaks every Friday. But it is very usual that if you have new software that is not released yet, that you're testing, that you find bugs early and often. And by finding these bugs early and often, you will have a very, very high rate of finding bugs. Because of that, we have a very, very high rate also of less production defects, less like severe bugs in production. So that's basically where this goes. So very importantly, so this is how a lot of people I worked with, or large corporations, saw testing. So they always saw developing as a value center. They create something, they create the products we can sell. Testing, it's a cost center. They're there, they only break things. We don't see results, like we don't really understand how many defects are they like finding. Is it worth it? And I think like one big thing here is that like testing in general has a very hard time of articulating the value they are creating. And I think this helps here. This really, really helps here. Because in the end, what you can, like in a session, you can invite the VP of product or whatever. You can invite the UX designer. You can invite whoever and actually change it to a perception where also testers are seen as a value center. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stefan. Please don't forget to vote using the app. So let's take a look on the questions. What's your opinion on the opening keynote in terms of automated exploratory testing via AI machine learning?
I think at one point in time, and that's pretty far away, it will be there. Yes, but very importantly, I think it's the hardest problem to solve in testing with machine learning or AI. Like let me give you one example. If I put like a very, very good tester in front of a core banking application for 10 months, will he produce valuable test results? Probably not, because he might not have domain knowledge of what is core banking, how does it work. So regardless of how good or how intelligent this exploratory testing bot is, it will have a very, very hard time of actually, without industry knowledge, testing this core banking application. And I think it's always a bad thing to solve a problem that is hard for a human without knowledge and then use machine learning or AI in these fields. I think there's other things like automated testing. That's where we will see a lot of replacement by machine learning based or AI based products. Exploratory testing, really this learning process, I think that will take a lot more time and probably will not exist in the things how we think about it right now.
Okay, the next one. Every company is different and the teams are different. Why should we limit everyone to one common definition for exploratory testing?
I'm not saying that you have to fundamentally limit everyone to this one common understanding of testing. If you're just clicking around and testing, people will always do this anyways. But if you want a structured approach on how to scale exploratory testing on an organization level, where you can report out of, where you can show results out of, I think then it makes sense to give a common framework. It's not saying you have to do it exactly like this. I showed you multiple things to choose from. I would give people a framework, not fundamentally restricting them to one very, very, very exact approach.
The next one, can you share some measurements, metrics, what to use during exploratory testing?
I don't think I fully understand the question, but yes, yes you can. I think that's the premise of the talk.
Okay. What is your experience with testing consistently, but on an unfinished or partially developed feature project? Is it possible to have effective exploratory session?
Yes, 100%. So myself, I'm a product manager right now with Tricentis, test automation company. So our product is developed in sprints, and usually we do test exploratory during where we don't have a finished product. We need tested stories each and every sprint. There is no option of not testing those because we don't have time in the end to test before we release. We don't have code freezes. We release as soon as the last sprint is over. That's when release is. So we need to consistently test. And so we consistently exploratory test each and every sprint that we can actually show results already, find bugs already, and immediately fix them. I think that's the best thing about it. You have this very, very fast response time of you find the bug. If you do it in the team, immediately fix the bug, and it's done. I think that's a big, big upside of why you want to do exploratory testing, because it takes a lot more time to define a manual test or automated test. That takes a lot of time, right? You need to write it down. Then if you automate it, you need to create the automation. It is valuable. You need it for the regression, but I think in sprint exploratory testing makes a lot of sense if you are testing in an agile environment. So yes, it's very, very positive. I would say a good experience.
Okay, the next one. What is the source for your presented numbers and graph?
So it depends. So the one numbers in the end that I showed you was one specific customer project that we did. That's the results we measured. For all the other graphs, it is I don't know if you have exact numbers other than that, but for most graphs, we would either use customer experience. So Tricentis has more than, I think, 500 something customers, all in testing. We're a testing company. So that's where a lot of that comes out. Also what we do internally in our engineering. That's where we do try a lot. before we sell testing products. So what we try a lot is test it in our own engineering department, in our own teams. If it works out, do it with the clients. That's also where we draw a lot of numbers from, because we have a lot of numbers, because we track all of it within our own company. That's easy. So that's where a lot would come from. The last one numbers was one specific customer.
The next one, any advice on introducing non-test disciplines to exploratory techniques, as most find it an abstract concept?
I have to read it quickly myself. Any advice on introducing non-test disciplines to explore? Oh, so do you mean like non-test disciplines? I'm confused. Like maybe you meant like people who are not in the testing discipline. If that is the case, I would say educate them. It's really, I think it's the easiest way to do. It's not as abstract. Like there is very, very concrete definitions of all the different concepts I talked about. It's James Whittaker, Jonathan Bach, James Bach. They wrote books about it, but there is shorter versions like summaries of books, YouTube videos of talks. There is very good definitions for all of it. I don't think it's very abstract. I think it's like exploratory testing as a term, very abstract, yes. But the like different parts and concepts are very well defined.
All right.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? We have 3 minutes left. Any questions?
If not, enjoy a longer break.
Yeah, 8 minutes. Thank you. Thank you, Stefan.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.